It's time for the Financial Crisis Talk Center with Ken Gross and David Einstandig from Thav Gross.
Credit card debt is number one. I view it as financial cancer.
40% of your gross income is going to just pay the debt service. You got no chance of getting out.
I would give up my credit score to get rid of debt.
Here's your host, Ken Gross.
Foreclosure. The Financial Crisis Talk Center now, for this segment and our next segment, we are going to talk about foreclosure. The good, the bad, and the ugly of foreclosure. We are going to dig deep into it. David Einstandig, we're going to look at it. Brian Small, we're going to dissect everything you ever could imagine about foreclosure.
Speaking of the ugly, where exactly did that shirt come from?
What do you have against my shirt?
Look at you, tongue-tied already in the first 2 minutes.
This is my Clint Eastwood shirt.
Oh, okay. Well, you better make it another day then.
I think we might be changing the show from the good, the bad, and the ugly to hang 'em high.
So what do you got? What do you got for me on foreclosure today, Ken?
I want to dig into foreclosure. We're going to break it down, but first of all, a couple interesting issues. Homeowners rise above water on mortgages. So it came out last week. There were, just so you realize, there were 16 million homes underwater up until last year. 2 million of those homes have managed to come out from being underwater, but we still have 13.8 million homes.
Yeah, but it's an interesting article. It doesn't tell you why they came out from underwater. Did they come out from underwater because of values increasing, or did they come out from underwater because they were foreclosed and now they've re-entered the market at a lower value with the possibility that now these homes we owe less?
Market values have gone up.
I know market values have gone up, but now there's no inventory in the United States anyway to buy.
I just want to kind of look back and kind of illustrate, even though we're on the radio, but we're also on TV, I want you to visualize what I'm about to do. I'm going to demonstrate for everyone what happened to the American economy in 2009. Everybody had a home. It was the American dream. Home, 3-bedroom. I don't have a garage with this home. And then all of a sudden,
it looks like a big loft.
Ended up going underwater because property values dropped to the point where it hit sea level, and they fell and they went underwater. And there you have, if you're listening on the radio, I have now dropped a house into a bowl of water, and it is submerged in the water at the roof line.
I was just saying, I think I need to object to the exhibit because your bowl is woefully insufficient.
This is a beautiful bowl brought to you from my house without the knowledge of my wife, Bonnie. By the way, the big salad bowl, honey, is now sitting here with a house inside of it, an underwater house.
I would not even bring the bowl back because she's going to want to know who took the bowl out and why. I would just get rid of the bowl.
I was thinking about coloring the water with food color to make the water look blue, but I figured that was getting a little bit overboard.
I think the visual is good enough. So the house is underwater.
House is underwater. And I want you to know, I have to credit our gift certificate assistant and friend who's recovering, Cindy Schiffman. It was her idea for the house underwater. She got me the house, and I supplied the bowl.
Okay,
so thank you, Cindy.
So the house is underwater. So what do we do about it? Because otherwise, when we listen to Joe the bartender, we walk away from the house and we get foreclosed.
Well, we could talk about it. I kind of want to just stay on the house for a little bit.
What was the most interesting part?
This little bowl here.
What was the most interesting part of the article? About some homes rising above.
To me, the most interesting part of the article is the fact that 13.8 million homes are still underwater. And that's what people have to remember and think about from the standpoint of how difficult of a situation this is. And our economy right now is prices are rising and there's a demand for homes, which means if you're thinking about the idea of exiting a house from underwater on a short sale, now is the time to do it. You still have this year to get it done. The Debt Relief Act was extended one more year, so the cancellation of indebtedness as taxable income on your principal residence doesn't apply if you close before December 31.
You profess to have a decent accounting background, don't you, Ken?
I do.
Okay. And Accounting 101, when you're looking at a financial statement, what do you look to? What's really important?
Assets exceeding liabilities. Equity is really the essence of what you're looking for. FN.
The footnotes.
Oh, the footnotes.
Because they tell what we also refer to as some of the rest of the story.
I like to look at cash in bank also, depending. Like if I was counseling my daughter to look at the financial statement of a prospective husband, I'd say, look at cash in bank.
The footnotes on this article mention the areas in the United States where the increase has occurred, and what is not listed is any city in the state of Michigan.
Well, actually, we're not listed as the top, but it was in the recently in the paper that we had approximately an 8% gain nationally, and I think in the Metro Detroit we had a 13% gain over last year.
Yeah, but it's 13% growth from the lowest possible values that we've ever reached.
There you've hit it. The Schiller Case Index starts at 100, and where we were when in 2008, when things were going good, we were only at around 89 on the index, and we dropped all the way down into the 60s. Cities like Miami and Phoenix were at 108 and 110. They dropped the same 30%. They dropped all the way down to 80, and now they're coming back up into the 90s. We went all the way down into the low 60s, and we're trying to get to 70. So we are so far behind the 8 ball, it's crazy.
Well,
and that is a footnote issue.
It certainly doesn't help when nationally articles come out and say that 3 cities in Michigan are some of the worst places to live in the country.
Yeah, but the worst was in New Jersey.
Flint, Warren, Detroit.
What magazine said that?
I think that was Forbes, I believe.
Yeah, because they don't. The Cheesecake Factory is coming to Detroit, so
it
can't be that bad of a place to live.
Great, 3,500 calorie dishes, just what we need.
You don't have to order the Oreo cheesecake. I go to the Cheesecake Factory. I don't even order cheesecake.
It's not the
cheesecake. They've got a great Santa Fe salad. They've got good Mexican, which is a little bit high in the calories, but I like the Cheesecake Factory. Okay. It's going to be a cool spot. Anyway,
I agree.
Let's talk about foreclosure. Now, before we get to the good, the bad, and the ugly, we have to get to the what is it? What is foreclosure? I really want to, we're doing this over 2 segments. If you're watching the show or listening to the show for this hour-long process, this segment and the next, I want you to come out of this with a much better understanding of everything about foreclosure. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to start off and we're going to say, what are the elements of foreclosure? What do you need to know and learn about it? And then after that, then we're going to look at what's good, what's bad, and then we're going to dig into the ugly. We're going to go easy on the shirt. We'll be back after the break.
No one ever thinks that a serious injury can happen to them, but it can, and it does. And it can happen to you. And when it does, you need a fighter in that courtroom for you. Call me, Ben Johnson. Automobile accident, police misconduct, medical malpractice, product liability. You know what you're up against, how hard it is to get answers. When all you want is justice, call me, Ben Johnson. Whatever your legal crisis, I will fight for you. Call me today.
Do you have tax problems, unfiled returns? Facing levies on wages in your property? You need an expert, not a cartoon character or salesman. Thav Gross is your solution.
You need to look at the big picture. That's what we do. We develop a plan that's right for you.
I had major tax problems. I didn't know what to do.
We did. We sat down together and solved your tax problem.
No more letters, no more phone calls. They saved me.
Call Thav Gross, 888-235-HELP.
Don't let legal problems destroy your family or your life. Get the justice you deserve. I'm Sabrina Cronin of the Cronin Law Firm, and I'm here to make things right. My firm handles family law, business law, and even criminal law. We can handle all of your legal needs. So whatever you're facing, I'm here to get you justice. You can't afford not to call. Call 855-CRONIN-LAW today.
If your house is underwater, please listen to this important message.
The rules have finally changed. We're seeing some great loan modifications with reduced principal, and short sales are easier to get done than people think. The biggest problems I see are people wait too long or they try and do it themselves. There are no second chances.
If you're underwater in your house, call the experts.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
Going from hourly to salary seemed like a good career move, but now you're working 60 hours a week instead of 40, and you aren't getting paid any of that extra time. You're stuck, right? Wrong. You can be on salary and still be entitled to overtime. If you've been wrongly denied such pay, you may be entitled to that and more. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
Welcome back. All right, it's time to dig into foreclosure. The first question is, what is foreclosure? You got to define it. And I'm going to define it. The goal is not to give you legalese. You don't need to get the stuff that you hear from the lawyers that you can't understand. I'm going to try. We want plain English. So now, after saying that, I should have come up with this completely compobulated
under MCL 600.3240.
Step up. Okay, here it's a process by which someone secures a contractual obligation, typically a promise to pay money, with the obligors, the person who has to pay the money, with their interest in land. That's what the mortgage is. The person who's making the loan, who's taking the security interest in your property, is called the mortgagee. The person who's borrowing the money, who's pledging their land as security, that's the homeowner, is the mortgagor. That's the OR. So the borrower is the mortgagor. The mortgage is sometimes is a security document. In some states, if you're reading things, you'll hear the term deed of trust. In California, they call it a deed of trust rather than calling it a mortgage. It's the same thing. The mortgage is the security interest. The obligation to pay the debt is separate, and we talk about it on the show a lot. That's the mortgage note or the promissory note. That's where you're saying, I promise to pay you back the $350,000 that you've borrowed and that you're pledging the house as security to repay.
For all practical purposes, though, you could think of it as the mortgage follows the note. So they hang out together. They're connected. If you don't pay that note, that promise, you risk losing your security, which is the mortgage.
In the context of foreclosure, yes. But in the context of bankruptcy, when Brian gets involved, no. Because we can file a bankruptcy and get rid of the note, rip it up, discharge it, and throw it away. But that doesn't rip up, discharge, and throw away the mortgage. The security interest in the lien on the house still stays. So it's important to understand that there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, the fantastic thing about being able to do a bankruptcy is even though you get rid of the note, if you want to pay the house, you can keep the house. If you don't want to pay for the house, 5 years from now after filing a bankruptcy, you can walk away.
And that gets to the good side, which is ahead of the game. So I want to come back to that when we get to it, because we're still on the what is side. I just want to keep going with foreclosure issues. Now, you have different types of foreclosure. You have, in some states, you have what we call non-judicial foreclosure or foreclosure by advertisement. Michigan allows that type of foreclosure. Most foreclosures that occur in the state of Michigan are foreclosures by advertisement. In that case, what the lender does is you have to have a power of sale in the mortgage document.
Which they all do.
The lender declares a default, and then all he has to do is publish in the legal news a notice of foreclosure and a pending auction sale and give at least 4 weeks notice, and typically what they give in Michigan is 5, just as a safety valve.
So you're saying, Ken, a lender does not have to even step into court. They don't have to ask the judge for anything. They just have to have a clause in the mortgage that says they can do this. They send out their notices. They do it in the paper, and that's called advertisement.
And 5 weeks later, there's an auction at the county courthouse, and the high bidder, which is typically the lender, is usually the only bidder because it can bid the amount of its debt or less. The house is sold at foreclosure. Then you have a redemption period, which I'll get to the redemption period in a second. You also have another type of foreclosure that's called judicial foreclosure, which is a lawsuit. Michigan also allows that type of foreclosure. Some states only allow that type of foreclosure. Florida, for instance, you must foreclose judicially, which is filing a lawsuit, serving the papers, you have discovery, you get an attorney, you have the same like any type of a lawsuit, the same issues that go on. It's much more cumbersome, much more time-consuming, and allows a much greater opportunity to defend the case and challenge the foreclosure. That's why all the robo-signing and all of that litigation and scandal that came out of the mortgage crisis over the last 2 years all came out of Florida, because there were so many foreclosures, and you had lawyers digging in, defending the cases, and they found out that all these documents were being, falsely signed and things like that. That's where that all came from.
So the practical end is the vast majority of foreclosures in Michigan are going to be done by advertisement without a court process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, once you have, whether you have judicial or you have advertisement, once the house goes to sale, you have a redemption period. In Michigan, the general rule is you have 6 months to redeem the house, which means you can remain in possession for 6 months before you can actually be physically put out of the home through an eviction process. It's 6 months if you've paid less than half of the balance on the original loan. After that, you're shaking your head. After that, it's a year.
It's if you owe more than 66 2/3 on the mortgage. If it's if it's 4 units or less residential property, and if it's less than 3 acres, then you're 6 months.
All right, well, and then the less than 3 acres has changed, because now in the last act, it used to be if you had farm property more than 3 acres, you got a year. Now you don't get that year unless you actually can prove that you're a farmer. You have to file a IRS form showing that you're a farmer. You have to actually use the land for farming purposes now to get that year. But you're right on. So for the simple thing is, think in terms of 6 months. That's the time period that you're going to have to be able to stay in the home.
Right. Again, practically, that covers almost all of us who have residences and houses where we don't fall into the 1 year, we fall into the 6 months.
Right. I want to read before we want to stay on this, but before I forget, I want to thank our sponsors: Sabrina Cronin Law Firm, Gold Star Law, Van Johnson Law, and also even our gift certificate sponsors who are always with us: Johnny Pomodoros, Rendezvous Restaurant, Garden Fresh, Detroit Popcorn. I appreciate the sponsorship. Right, so that's the what is in terms of the elements of foreclosure. Now let's look at the good and the bad. We'll look at the bad first, and then we'll take a break, because the bad's simple. What's bad? Foreclosure means if you don't do anything, you lose your home, unless you do something to stop it. That's bad. We're going to take a break. We come back, we're going to start looking at the good and the ugly of foreclosure.
You like your job. What you don't like is the way your boss has been treating you. He's making comments about how you look instead of your work, and he's been touching you inappropriately. If you complain, is he allowed to fire you? Absolutely not. Unwelcome sexual comments, advances in contact are illegal in the workplace. Make him pay. Gold Star Law is here to help you through your employment law problem, whatever it is.
Gold Star Law, protecting employees' rights. Call 1-800-WAGES-10 for a free consultation today.
Financially strapped? Do you want to save your home?
It's all about preserving future income. Bankruptcy is one option. When it's right, it's the least costly, most effective way to save your home, eliminate a second mortgage, and wipe out credit card debt. But you need to address the problem now.
We help people with bankruptcy. Call the experts.
We're Thav Gross. Our firm will solve your problem.
888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
Don't let legal problems destroy your family or your life. Get the justice you deserve. I'm Sabrina Cronin of the Cronin Law Firm, and I'm here to make things right. My firm handles family law, business law, and even criminal law. We can handle all of your legal needs. So whatever you're facing, I'm here to get you justice. You can't afford not to call. Call 855-CRONIN-LAW today.
Carrying too much debt? Dump your debt. Call Thav Gross.
You don't need to be broke, and you don't need to hit rock bottom. If you have income and you're struggling with debt, dump it. Think about the next 10 or 20 years. If you do what the banks tell you, you'll have nothing to retire with. There is a solution.
Don't waste your future. Call Thav Gross. We're experts at eliminating credit card debt. 888-235-HELP. That's 888-235-HELP.
No one ever thinks that a serious injury can happen to them, but it can, and it does. And it can happen to you. And when it does, you need a fighter in that courtroom for you. Call me, Ben Johnson. Automobile accident, police misconduct, medical malpractice, product liability. You know what you're up against, how hard it is to get answers. When all you want is justice, call me, Ben Johnson. Whatever your legal crisis, I will fight for you. Call me today.
Welcome back. So I'm with Dave Einsteinig, Brian Small, Ken Gross. We're sitting here, we're exploring foreclosure, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've talked about what it is. We talked about the bad. Now let's kind of identify some of the good of foreclosure. Could there be good? Well, believe it or not, there is. And that's why we call it that's why we call it a tool of financial crisis management. Right? Think in terms of if you're underwater. If you're underwater in the house, it's not always a good thing to keep that house. So, the whole idea of hanging on to the house that's underwater is not necessarily always the ultimate goal. So you got to kind of look at it that way. So here are the opportunities. First of all, at the foreclosure sale, just so everybody understand, when the lender shows up at the foreclosure sale, let's assume your mortgage balance is $300,000. And let's say your house is worth, doesn't matter, let's say it's worth $200,000. If the lender shows up at the foreclosure sale and bids the full $300,000 that you're owed, that's called what, David?
That's called a full credit bid, Ken. Also, it doesn't necessarily have to be the lender. It could be whoever shows up. Just for the, you're at the courthouse, the sheriff says, we have this unit up, and whoever bids, bids.
You're right. All right. So, but if they bid for a full credit bid, they bid the $300,000, that means your debt is wiped out and gone.
Because you have to think of it this way. Here's what the case law says. It says that's as if a bag of cash
was
handed over to the lender, handed over to the bank. Then if it's full, you don't owe them anymore. They rip up that mortgage, they rip up that promissory note, and you go on your merry way.
All right, so I brought in the bowl in the house. Do you have the bag of cash?
I do, but that's why there was the
that's a prop. That's why I thought you were supposed to bring the bag of cash.
Yeah, there's flashing lights outside. They're waiting for us.
Did you bring the cash?
It's funny. I don't carry cash.
Great. All right. So, well, you did a good job of explaining the bag of cash anyway. But if you were really engaged in the show, you would have come with a bag with dollar signs on it with shredded paper.
Okay. Now, but Ken, the reality is
still
that
ugly.
A full credit bid
Thank you.
occurs. If you go back to 2007, before the crisis happened, a full credit bid used to happen about 95% of the time. It dropped to as low as 25% of the time and is moving back up, and if I had to guess, it happens about 50% of the time. But what that does now, if we don't have a full credit bid, it leaves people with a liability after the foreclosure, which is a bad thing.
Correct. And in that sense, just to be with the example I just said, the house is worth $200,000. The lender's obligation is to bid market value. If they bid the full amount of the debt, then you're off the hook on the debt, and then you could just stay there, live in the house through the redemption period, drag it out as long as you can, and then leave, and you don't have to worry about the liability. But if they bid the market value, $200,000, now you're exposed to a $100,000 deficiency, which the lender can then sue you in circuit court for that deficiency. A lot of people sit there saying, well, I just walked away from my home and I haven't heard anything. Well, they got 10 years.
Up to 10 years,
to
depending
sue
on the type
you.
of mortgage.
If the obligation to pay back the debt is contained in the mortgage document, in Michigan you got 10 years. If it's not contained in the mortgage document, only in the mortgage note, then they'd have 6 years from your last date of payment. However, if anyone wants to have some fun, I mean, you have to define fun in a very broad sense. Go and pull out your mortgage and look at it, and I guarantee you're going to see in one of the paragraphs, like usually on the second page, that there's a specific obligation to repay the debt contained in your mortgage. Why is it there? So that you're stuck with the 10-year statute of limitations rather than the 6. So that's your homework for the week if you're listening to the show.
So if the bid at the sale is less, that means you're exposed to getting sued. Is it possible, though, if you think that you got shafted by the bidder, by the bank and they underbid. You know, my home I know is worth $200, and they come in and bid $100 because they didn't do a real appraisal.
Now you have a defense. So if you end up being sued for that $100,000, you have to hire an attorney because you can't do it yourself. You'll get eaten alive. And you have to go in there and you defend the case saying the lender bid too low, they didn't bid market value, and that's what you use as leverage to settle the claim and get out from under the debt if you're in that situation. But another strategy that Brian likes to use a lot of time, because Brian's our bankruptcy expert, is suppose you're ripe for bankruptcy. If you file a bankruptcy and a Chapter 7 and you're able to discharge the debt, now you have a situation where you don't have to worry about being sued for a deficiency. You could let the house go to foreclosure if you wanted, and you can drag the process out as long as possible. And at the end of the foreclosure process, after the redemption period is run, after the eviction proceeding has come and gone, and you have to get out, then you move on to the next home.
Hold on, Brian. Brian, I got to ask you this. This is really important, though, because I want to make sure I understand it. Does it make a difference if I file the bankruptcy before it goes to that sale or after?
You know, it's funny. That's what I was just about to comment on. From the standpoint of causing the maximum amount of delay to allow the mortgagee to stay in the house for as long as humanly possible, we want to ride that baby right up to the date of the sheriff's sale and file that bankruptcy the day before. Because what it does is it stops the sheriff's sale temporarily. The lender has to go get court approval to begin the sheriff's sale again. And quite honestly, the way the process works, it can cause 6, 8, 10 months worth of delay just by filing that bankruptcy the day before the sheriff's sale.
Now, keep in mind, we're talking right now about a Chapter 7 bankruptcy to discharge the debt, to discharge that note. It's not a plan to keep the house, but it's a plan to stay in the house as long as possible without paying anything, which Brian and I like to call that our way of getting your equity out.
So how long could this be?
We've seen it go, at a minimum it's going to be 14 to 16 months. On the long side, it could be 3-4 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had clients stay in their houses up to 48 months for free.
If you have what I believe to be an incompetent lender, such as, for example,
all of them?
Bank of America, it could be 3-4 years.
You know,
that's what I believe. I'm not stating that they are incompetent, just for the record, quote unquote. I'm just saying, in my opinion, there's a lot of examples where they are incompetent.
You know, opportunity, we talked about that underbid. The other opportunity that comes out of that underbid is to be able to buy your house back for the amount of money that underbid was called the right of redemption.
Because you can pay for the redemption price. But you have to watch out if you have a second mortgage.
Absolutely, but there's opportunity abounds with foreclosure.
All right, we're coming up on we're at the end of the segment. Our next segment, we're going to stay on this whole topic of foreclosure, the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you're interested in attending a seminar, check our websites for dates and times, and then we'll be back to talk about the good foreclosure, good, the bad, and the ugly in our next segment. So be sure and join us.